how do you get an idea for a poem, and how do you develop it?
How do I get an idea for a poem, and how do I develop it? It's a good question. It's a good question. One thing one is always advised by books on writing, certainly books on creative writing, and particularly poetry, is to have a notebook, and it's a very good discipline, and very often a discipline which unfortunately one neglects. So one has a good idea, and one doesn't have a notebook, and one thinks one's going to remember that good idea, and then 3 days later you can't remember it. Okay, well, so I'm very human in that endeavor, and I advise you, and I advise myself, to get a notebook, right? Okay, so this is a new notebook, by the way, and I have a couple of things I've written, okay, and I'll read them to you, and you'll get a sort of sense, for example, where these come from. They're sort of really kind of, you know, I walk every morning. Writers walk. You've probably heard that one before. And I like to think that when I walk, I have no purpose, no intent, you know. And I like to think that I think natural thoughts, you know, i.e., you know, whatever, you know. I've forgotten the expression involves sheep, doesn't it? Wool-headed. I get wool-headed or something. But here we go. I call them mustard seeds. I didn't invent that term either. Other people call them mustard seed. I wanted as a small kid to be world famous, not for the attention alone, but like George V and Franklin Delano Roosevelt, to have a tremendous, far-reaching stamp collection. This is true. This crossed my mind about 2 weeks ago, that really I wanted to be the most famous person in the world so I could have the best stamp collection. I thought that was an interesting thought, you know, and then, okay, spring. People methodically cleaning up the winter mess from inside their cars. I remember walking down, there's a residential suburb up there, and I was walking down looking and enjoying the normal spring things, and I noticed that there were all these people hanging, their backsides were hanging out of cars as they were all presumably prompted by each other, right? Cleaning their cars, right? So I thought that was a good one. And my love of the woods, much essentially influenced by reading British children's books, right, which I did. Since I lived in the city, how would I ever saw any woods, right? Okay. A title and motive for a book of poetry, Grumbles. Sometimes I'd come up with titles, right? I thought Grumbles would be a good one. And here's another one. In the treetop, the spring robins chattering like old women repetitively visiting the same subject, right? So I sort of thought, I don't think that one is kind of, you know, in any way insulting. It was sort of like that. And then a couple more. I was with another poet friend of mine, two poets, and Andre Farkas and Anne-Marie, and what happened is that the smoke alarm went off, right? And they were cooking dinner for me, among other things, and the smoke alarm went off, and they both picked up tea towels, and they were both standing face to face, flapping, you know, the air around the smoke alarm to try to get it to stop. And I thought that there's something deeply poetic about this, right? So I thought that would make a good poem. And here another one, a woolly bear caterpillar feasting on a bright red crab apple. I've never seen that before. And here's another one. Actually, 2 days ago, I was sort of walking along the street, and there's an industrial section at the bottom of the street up here, and there are all these big trucks coming at me, making these huge wide turns. And I thought, wide turns, wouldn't that make a great title, right, for an autobiography or for a book or for poems? Okay, so all of these things, as you can see, sort of kind of taken from plain looking at things, right? And kind of these moments sort of kind of suddenly have I guess almost a metaphorical implication, like wide turns, and the notion of sort of, the poets somehow flapping these towels. Now, it isn't just, for example, when I develop, moving on to the second stage, it isn't that, I then sort of go on about these two people flapping, the smoke alarm, right? That's important. It's sort of kind of trying to investigate to some degree what that emotionally means to me, right? Well, that is, as Robert Frost said, that's the wisp at the end of the cotton that gets the cotton through the needle, right? And then you pull the cotton through the needle. Well, you pull the poem through the eye of the needle, concentrating on the emotional resonance, of that. And and to some degree it develops, right? I mean, I don't know what I'm going to do with wide turns, but I might be walking along the street or walking in the country or just noodling around, right? And suddenly there'll be something else, which will sort of kind of, another penny will drop, right? Which will to some degree have something to do with wide turns, right? So it's a kind of an evolution from, as I said before, these mustard seeds, which are sort of fragments of potentially figurative language. And I think a lot of my poems arise from that process.
Great. Thank you very much.
It's okay? Okay.
Yeah.